Welcome to the Citadel GrayLine. My name is Kyle Weaver. I'm an ex-Citadel football player, played offensive line for the Dogs for 5 years, won 2 SoCon championships where they got the rings in front of us. I'm sitting here with Jeff Hartsell from the Post and Courier who follows Citadel sports, and we're here. We're excited for the show. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk a lot of bit different stuff. We're going to talk about the Wofford game, how that's encouraging, in my opinion, for the Dogs, and what we can expect going forward for our Citadel Bulldogs as they finished out the SoCon slate and then finished the season up with Clemson. Jeff, hey, look, they lost a close game. It is what it is. They played well. They had the chance to win. As we were talking about last week, hey, having a chance to win is a big deal for this Citadel team. Gets them the experience of being in those close games for these young players who haven't been there before. So overall, I think it was a good situation for the Citadel.
They played hard. They played really hard. They put a lot into that Wofford game, especially on defense. Those guys held Wofford to 99 rushing yards.
Right, which is amazing.
Lowest in 10 years.
Right.
Not since West Virginia in 2005 have they been held below 100 yards.
Yeah.
The difference was Wofford found a way to pass the ball when they couldn't run. The Citadel could not pass the ball when they couldn't run, and Wofford didn't turn it over the way the Citadel did at the goal line.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the next segment about the recap, but, both defense played lights out. Both of these rushing offenses are always top 3, 4 in the country. So for both of these rushing attacks to struggle, not just one, but both to struggle, it's a crazy sight. So, we wouldn't have been sitting here, and whoever passes the ball, better this week's going to win the game. We weren't saying that this time last week. So, kind of an outcome that, hey, in college football, you got to find a way to win, and they did that.
You tell Coach Thompson and Blake Harrell, the defensive coordinator, that you're going to hold them to 99. They'll take that and see what happens.
Right, yeah.
And they came within 70 seconds of making it happen.
Right. And, this tells us a lot about the SoCon. That matchup tells us a lot about the SoCon, what we have to coming for us in the next few weeks. So we're going to take a little break. We're going to be right back. In the next segment, we're going to talk about the game recap. We're going to talk about everything that happened. Later in the show, we're going to talk about what does this mean about Wofford, how good is Wofford. We're going to talk about the playoff hopes, and we're going to have Megan Gunter from the Citadel Football Association join us, and we're going to talk about what the Citadel Football Association is doing for the Citadel program and how we all can help. So we'll be back and look forward to it. Thanks for joining. Welcome back to the Citadel GrayLine. My name is Kyle Weaver. I am the co-host with Jeff Hartsell from the Post and Courier, who follows Citadel sports closer than anybody I know. So right in this segment, we're going to talk about the game recap, which we already hit. But basically, the Citadel played Wofford very, very closely in the game, and it was a good game for the Citadel.
Well, after having terrible starts against Sanford and Mercer, they had a great start.
Right.
Couldn't script that first drive any better.
Right.
16 plays, like 80-some yards.
Right. Triple option drive right there.
Yeah,
the
8 minutes off
about.
the clock.
Right.
Just really well executed. And then Jordan Black came in and had a similar drive later in the half. So you go in halftime up 14-7, and you're feeling pretty good about the Dogs.
And you have two quarterbacks that both had good drives, so you're confident in that. Which we saw the return of the dual quarterback, which is another thing. Why did you think that Coach went back to that system after talking to him this week?
Well, he said they had two different game plans, one for Dom and one for Jordan Black, and I'm not enough of a I don't have a coach's eyes to see what the difference in the game plans was. Maybe you could expound on that. And it worked great in the first half. The problem is almost all the Citadel's offense came on those two drives. Second half, way too many 3-and-outs, and, of course, the crucial turnover at the goal line. So this offense still finding its way. They're only averaging 18 points a game, Kyle. That's not enough to get it done. They've scored 2 touchdowns on offense in each of the last 3 games, and that's just not enough help.
That's right.
For the defense.
It's not.
So,
and we go back to that, maybe the player's perspective of why coaches going with Dom instead of Jordan, or Jordan instead of Dom. I mean, like we talked about before, they're 2 different quarterbacks. If we're going to try to get Dom up the middle, run him up the middle, let him run over some people with Jordan, you're going to try to get him to the outside, maybe get some outside play going. As well as Dom, he's won 2 SoCon championships. He's seen a lot, and it seemed like Wofford. I would have anticipated more of the single quarterback system, to be honest with you, because they're in a veteran team who knows triple option. The coaches are going to throw things at the quarterbacks that are going to try to confuse them. And so I would have expected more Dom than Jordan in that game. So I was a little surprised after the week before where we only saw 1 quarterback to kind of go back to the double option in that game. But, maybe they thought that's what Wofford would think too. So maybe they went with a dual quarterback.
It seemed like it was planned to, because Jordan went in on the 3rd series.
Right.
That's pretty early.
It was.
And Dom had that 1 good series. So I think they had a plan this week of using both of them in a different way and seeing – because you got to try something against Wofford.
Right.
They know the triple option so well.
Right.
I think running your standard stuff, especially when you have a young offensive line, is not going to get it done.
I think last year when we kind of reviewed that game and saying, hey, what could we have done better? I think everybody realized it's like, hey, look, if we want to beat these guys, we can't run our base offense. Like we got to run the plays that are high risk, high reward, and it's scary to run those against teams like that. But at the same time, it's those plays that get their eyes in the wrong places and make them think. Where if we just run the base plays over and over again, which sometimes seems to be a theme, which is great against most teams because eventually you're just going to wear them out. But against Wofford, who sees that every day at practice and during camp and sees that, rep in, rep out, you have to throw in those trick plays to say to beat them. And I think a team like Furman's going to be the same way. Chattanooga, they're talented, as they've been talented as far as skilled players. But those types, Chattanooga, VMI, Western, you can kind of run their base and just beat them off of that type of discipline. But a team like Wofford, man, you really do have to.
You need something extra.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
And you mentioned running the base plays, and the series that sort of bothered me the most was Citadel was up 16-14. They had got the safety, and go ahead. Yeah, they had the safety, and they got the ball back with about 8 minutes to go, and ran the fullback up the middle 3 times in a row and punted. 1 or 2 first downs right there might have been enough to not salt the game away, but to make it really tough on Wofford to come back. And my question for you is, are those reads or are those just gives to the fullback, or couldn't you tell?
Sometimes it's like, hey, keep giving the ball to the fullback until I tell you to pull it. And those coaches are looking for something. When they see that linebacker do something or they see that, DN do something, they're like, all right, we're pulling it. And when we pull it, it's going to be a touchdown. And there's been situations where they literally tell you, we're going to pull it this time and it's going to go for a touchdown. And it does.
And nothing against Lorenzo Ward, who's the backup fullback who was in on that series. And they gave it to him 3 times in a row. If everybody was healthy and here who should be here, Lorenzo might not be playing that much.
Right.
So
that's definitely a position that we lost a lot.
Yeah. And to give it to just the fullback when it hasn't worked all game 3 times in a row in that situation bothered me a little bit.
Yeah, hey, look, that's a triple, and that's what drives people crazy about the triple, and that's why, we don't see more big programs running the triple is because, hey, it's tough. But the thing is like to work the triple, you have to do things like that, and maybe that would have been a situation where we should have ran one of our more exotic plays, but
and I can see the argument you don't want to take a chance in your own end and hand them the ball in good when you do have a lead at that point. And it was 8 minutes to go. It's a long time left in the game. But 1 or 2 first downs there might have made it really hard on Wofford to come back.
And it just goes back to it. Those coaches, look, they have a young offensive line, and they're just trying to maybe not confuse them as well. So maybe they're just trying to run the basic stuff just to run the basic stuff. But who knows? That's the coaches. I think I trust the coaches, and I hope everybody else does, even through this tough time. But let's talk about the defense. The defense played lights out, like we talked about earlier, 99 yards, which is the lowest yard since West Virginia a few years ago. So that's pretty exciting for the defense to say, look, we knew they were going to try to run all over us, but they couldn't.
Right. Khalil Williams played a great game, forced a turnover. Really got into the backfield a lot. Miles Pierce had another in a series of really good games. Miles was playing great this year. They really sold out to stop the run, and we're kind of say, if you can beat us throwing it, go ahead.
Right.
And it took them a while, but they finally did beat them throwing it. A couple of busts in the secondary, let some receivers run wide open, and one of them turned into a 60-yard touchdown, and the other one, I think he threw it down to the goal line and then scored a couple plays later.
That's how we beat teams as well. When we tend to throw the ball, we tend to have big plays through the air. So, that's going to happen, and you have to do that to match up with teams like this. You have to stack the box real big, and teams do it to us, and we have to make them pay, and they made us pay. So, a lot of credit to them for making us pay. But
the last two games, they didn't really make them pay through the air. You won at Spartanburg, and then the playoff game was 10-3 until late in the game, which they ended up winning 17-3. So it's a strategy that's worked in the past.
You take your chances.
Take your chances. Pick your poison. Right. And it took a while for Wofford to make them drink it, but they finally did. With 1:10 to go.
It's crazy. We'll talk about this later, but Wofford, man, just keeps winning these close games, and for now, hey, look, Wofford's looking like they're going to win the SoCon. We want them to look good. We want them to continue to win, just for the SoCon stakes. So, but man, they're winning a lot of close games, and we'll talk about this later. But does that mean Wofford isn't as good as everybody thinks, or does that mean that a SoCon is just so has so much depth that every game is close against a top 5 team?
Todd Shaughnessy, who writes for the Spartanburg paper about Wofford, last week he said they were undefeated but unconvincing.
Right.
And which makes sense when you consider the amount of close games they've won. But when you keep winning those close games, sooner or later you're going to convince people. Sort of like the Citadel did last year. Citadel had a lot of close games last year. Got some breaks that this team hasn't gotten yet.
Right.
Maybe they'll get a few down the stretch.
Right. So, we'll talk about a lot of that cool stuff later on. We're going to take a quick break. In the next segment, we're going to talk about what does this tell about the Citadel going against the rest of the SoCon slate, some of the teams that Wofford's already played, and, how we can get excited for the rest of the season before we play Clemson. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Citadel GrayLine. My name is Kyle Weaver. I'm here with Jeff Hartsell from the Post and Courier. We're going to talk about what last week's game, a very close game against Wofford, tells us about the games to come. So Wofford has played two of the teams that we have remaining. They played both Furman and Chattanooga, or VMI. Which one have they played?
They played Furman and Western Carolina,
okay.
two teams that the two better teams that you have left on your schedule.
Right. So these are like the big games that we say, hey, if we can win these two games out, we can really savage a good season, and we can. We may possibly
put yourself in at least the conversation for a playoff bid.
So let's talk about the Western Carolina game first. I remember that one. That was a big shootout game that they won at Western, if I'm correct, and it was a great game to be at, from what it seems. Very offensive, explosive, correct?
Yeah, 35-28 in overtime. They beat Western Carolina in Spartanburg. And they beat Furman 24-23 in the season opener, and that was while Furman was losing 3 straight games. They've turned it around and really coming on strong under Clay Hendricks. So if they had to play that game now, Furman might be a favorite. You never know.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. It does tell you that the Citadel can compete with Furman and Western if they put out the kind of effort that they did against Wofford.
Right.
And I think, as we mentioned, over the next 2 weeks, they have a chance to build up some confidence and maybe get some things going on offense as they play Chattanooga and VMI. So from that standpoint, the schedule lays out pretty well. A team that really needs a shot of confidence has a chance to do that the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's kind of like, what we hoped in the beginning of the season, where you kind of had those 2 games that, hey, we're going to win these 2 games, and hopefully we'll do it in good fashion to kind of get the guys, hey, confident, and used to the game speed. So hopefully we'll do that again, and hopefully it'll turn out the right way this time. But, what it tells me is that both of these teams that we have, Western and Furman, they're going to be very tough competitors.
Oh, yeah.
And we have to treat it like a rivalry weekend, like we kind of treated Wofford. But both of these teams don't run triple. Like, we've had great success against both of these teams during my time at the Citadel. However, Furman's got the new coaching staff from CSU.
And they are running, I think, like the Air Force version of the option.
Right.
So Coach Clay Hendricks came from Air Force.
Right.
So Furman is running the ball really, really well.
Welcome back to the Citadel GrayLine. My name is Kyle Weaver. I'm an ex-Citadel football player, played offensive line for the Citadel from 2012 to 2016-17. So during that time, the Citadel went from a good season my freshman year to 3 bad seasons, and then back to 2 good seasons. So I kind of seen both sides, seasons like what we're going through right now and seasons of SoCon championships. And I'm here with my co-host, Jeff Hartsell, who has been following Citadel sports for a very long time, and has also seen up and down seasons like this. So, hey, look, this is tough, and it's tough talking as a Citadel fan about, hey, what's going wrong for 3 straight weeks. We really want the Citadel to win so we can talk about some of the good things they're doing. But, we're going to talk about the playoff hopes. So I would have said if we were sitting here 3 years ago, we probably wouldn't be talking about the playoffs.
Right.
But because of the last 2 seasons, because of the success that we have had, because of the 2 SoCon rings, because of, building a program, the new coaching staff, the culture that we now have at the Citadel, we expect to make the playoffs. And we expect
the Citadel name has some credibility now that maybe didn't have in past years. So, playoff hopes are very slim, very, very slim. Obviously, they got to win the next 4 games. Cannot lose any of the next 4 games. The loss to Clemson is kind of a given and won't be held against anybody by the FCS playoff committee. If they win the next 4 games, which is a big if, but not impossible, they would deserve some consideration, in my opinion. The question is, can they come back enough in the playoff committee and pollsters' eyes? They dropped out of the poll this week for the first time since November 2nd, 2015.
Which is amazing.
They haven't been ranked with 26 weeks, and the longest streak in the conference now is just 16 weeks by Samford. So that's really quite a streak of being ranked by the Citadel, and some would argue that they should have been out last week.
Yeah.
But,
hey, it is what it is.
They came back and played well against Wofford. If you end up beating Western Carolina and Furman, then you've beaten 2 playoff quality teams, I think, and Citadel does not have a quality win as of now.
Right.
So.
And, I think we look at these teams like Western, we look at these teams like Furman, who have played some really good teams really tight and won some games. If the Citadel can go out and win these games in a good, solid fashion, meaning more than just a close game, they might have to get some style points back to really – prove that they deserve to be in the playoffs. They might have to go out and blow one of these teams out and say, okay, man, they're turning it around. They're good. They're hot. They're deserving a spot. But if you also look at the times when we were 7, like we look at when we beat Carolina that first year that we made the playoffs, it's like we were 7-4 as well, I believe. And people said that we would not have made the playoffs if we didn't beat Carolina. So, it's tough. I mean, it's tough to be on that borderline of the playoffs. And there's a lot of factors that can go into it that you can't control, like everything. It's very subjective of what conference is better, who they've played. So it's tough to tell. And really, honestly, these polls mean something because they give you a gauge of where people who have knowledge on our leagues tell you you're ranked. But at the end of the day, it's different people making the decisions on who's going to be there. So, hey, who knows where they have us in their polls, or were we in the polls for 26 straight weeks on their agenda. So
I think there was 5 7-4 teams that made the playoffs last year, and then CSU made it at 7-3. They dropped a game somewhere in there, and then I think it was Illinois State. I could be wrong on that. There was one team that was 6-5 that made it. They had a win over Northwestern of the Big Ten. So, it's possible to get in with 7 wins, but the Citadel's a long way from that right now.
Right.
And if they win the next 4 and finish the season at 7-4, Brent Thompson will be very happy no matter if they make the playoffs or not.
Right. So you talked to Coach Thompson this week about the playoffs, about our goals, and he says our goals are still on the that goal is still on the table. The SoCon ring and the SoCon championship, it's probably not on the table. But he said we're still motivating our guys to pursue this playoffs. What is his overall attitude after these 3 tough weeks? What's his mindset going forward?
Well, I think it's not to push the panic button, not to try to make a lot of changes, but keep getting better at what they do. And I think they see the Chattanooga and VMI this next couple of weeks as a chance to make that happen, to get better at running the triple option, to get these young linemen some success and some confidence. And you can talk about that. Is there a point where you win a couple games and you feel like, oh, okay, this is how it's supposed to go and this is how it's supposed to feel? Or,
hey, when you're a young guy who hasn't played through the schedule once, you hear things about Chattanooga. You hear things about Furman. You hear about the games in the past and this and that. And hey, look, you say, hey, I haven't faced this guy before, and like that. There's a lot of just questions out there. So even I feel like for myself, even when we were, winning games here and there, the coaches control a lot of that. And right now, they're going to keep motivating the guys, but they're going to build in some encouragement to these guys because this is the type of season where they have to build these guys up. But when we started winning, you look back at those and it's just like, man, the ball just kept going our way. To where we kept losing the close games. We're just like, man, we're good, but we're just not winning the games because of this penalty or this, turnover or this or that. So, it's one of those deals where maybe there isn't a point where you're like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. But it's one of those deals where you start saying everything starts going our way, and it's fun. And, those guys, just they have to play through the schedule. I feel like once I played through the schedule once and I played all those teams and I played against a lot of those guys and I knew, hey, I deserve to be here. I played this team before. They weren't as, this and that as everybody said they were. So, then you start getting the confidence. But for these young guys, they're literally just trying to, every week it's a new defense they're going against. Yeah. They're switching defenses. They gotta go from one game plan to another, one defense to another. And in a 4-3 defense against a 50 defense, it's 2 different offenses, it feels. Your rules are different, who you're blocking. You got different plays that maybe you didn't even run the week before that now you're running.
Wow.
So, I mean, you're sitting there and, our base play, you have different rules. So it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And, they try to do that in camp to throw that at you, but it's different when, so like we try to get our scout team guys to run a 50 one day, and then they're going to jump into a 4.3 and this and that. But that's our scout team.
It's
and you see a guy who is very, very good at a 50 defense one week that you have to be very good against, and then the next week you have to face a team that runs the 4.3 very well. That's tough. And that's the biggest thing is these young guys, they just got to get confidence in playing fast. And you'll hear that from Coach Boyd all the time. Just play fast. Just play fast. Just play fast. So, but, as far as the playoffs, I think we do have a chance. I think if we win these games in a good fashion coming down the stretch, I think we can win back some votes. But, the biggest thing is I'm going to go back to this as a fan and as a former player, is the playoffs should be secondary. Like, hey, if we take care of business, we get the playoffs, that's great. But building momentum for next year and it is big. And I'm not giving up on this season or anything because I still have faith in this team. But at the same time, is we all know that now this is a rebuilding year, and I felt that going into this season with all the players that we lost for this and that reason. But if we could really win a lot of these games and get some confidence going into the next season, it could go a long way, as well as it could get us back into the top 25 in the polls as we start next season, which is a big deal, because it puts you in a spot where you don't have to climb the polls.
Well, you've got to beat Chattanooga and VMI, and then if you can beat one of Western and Furman, that gets you to 6 wins, a winning record,
right?
And which is, everybody wants to have a winning record.
Yep.
So, these I think the Western Carolina and Furman games will really make a huge difference in how this season is perceived.
So let's talk about this. So you look at the big playoff system for Division I, and you say, if you're going to lose a game, you want to lose it up front. That's why you see all these big matchups week 1. The teams aren't afraid to schedule the Florida States versus Alabamans because they know, hey, if we lose that game, we'll drop to 15. We'll drop a few spots, but then we can catch our way back up as other teams lose. Is it the same way? Like, hey, we have 3 losses, but maybe we got those out of the way, and if we do win out, except for Clemson, that maybe that will probably work in our favor, or is that not how it works at this level?
It could be, but there's 24 teams. That's a lot of teams to make the playoffs. So you start, when you get down to the bottom, you start picking between teams that have just okay resumes, not great or anything. So I think that's one reason why a team like the Citadel or Furman, which lost their first 3 games, still has a shot at getting in there. Furman obviously still has a shot at winning the league.
Right.
So, I think losing early is better than losing late. The thing I always wonder about, and I think we've talked about this before, is playing a team like Clemson or North Carolina like you guys did last year before the playoff start.
Right.
Did that have any effect, do you think, on the next game against Wofford, losing big at North Carolina?
Like a team like I don't think it does.
Okay.
And here's my reasoning. It's like Wofford had played us tough years and years and years and years and years. It was just a poor matchup for us. It is what it is. We could have played better. We could have won that game. All those things. I don't think it does. But the thing that's tough is hey, we went into that game and that was really truly a fun. It could have been a fun game. It didn't turn out to be fun because nobody wants to go up there and get beat like that. But it was cool because we got to understand, hey, we made the playoffs. We're here to have fun. If we win, we win. If we lose, we lose. Let's just go out and give it all. To where, you play them in the front of this season, there's a lot more to play for. You have a lot more to worry for. You don't know how your season's going to play.
Right.
And you're hesitant because you don't want to get – both situations you're hesitant. It's tough. Those games, ideally, if I'm making a schedule as a player, I want that game first game of the season. And here's the reason why is because when we played Florida State, which I think was our second game of the season after we played Coastal, we went down to Florida State. It was Florida State's home opener, and they had just won the national championship. So that game was sold out.
Yeah.
you don't play at a Division I school as a Division I AA school with a sold-out crowd. And because it was their first game back and everybody wanted to be there after they won the national championship, it was sold out for the first half at least, and it was great. Like, it was just an environment that you didn't see at, say, at Clemson, which I think might have a better environment, but, hey, they were, 5/8 the way full,
Right.
So, I like that because of that reason, is because by the end of the season, everybody's like, well, I've already been to 4 Clemson games, so I'll sit this one out, and then I'll go to the Carolina game at Carolina. I need a weekend off before that. So then they don't go, and it doesn't give you the same environment that
Kyle, if you can recall names, who's the toughest dude you went against? You look at Florida State, North Carolina, Clemson, South Carolina.
No names. I'm not good with names, but, honestly, like, the Florida State D-line, so I didn't play Clemson. Like, I was on the team, but didn't play Clemson. I didn't play against NC State. I played Carolina, North Carolina, and Florida State, as well as Georgia Southern. And I put Georgia Southern up there as just guys that I was just trying to – and I was a vet at that point. I was a guy who had been playing, who had the confidence, who was going into that game expecting to dominate. And I went in there and after hitting those guys a few times, you kind of get a feel of how it's going to be. And I was sitting there thinking, I got to come up with a game plan, and I got to get one quick because these guys are they were like, huge guys.
Wow.
And they weren't the most fast guys, like you say, at Florida State. But those guys, I just had to say, I got to do something different because, these guys are really good. And they just continued to – and they had the intensity that maybe the Florida States, the Carolinas didn't have. But the Florida State, what excited me about that game and our offensive line is when they were recruited, 4 of those guys were like 4 or 5 star recruits. Like, it was one of those classes where you're like, Florida State had a great recruiting class on D-line. So we got to go against a lot of guys who went out as juniors to go to the NFL. So, I mean, there was a lot of NFL guys on that line. Obviously North Carolina, I wouldn't say those guys were just really tall. They had long arms. They were like 6'4", 6'6". So, it was like one of those deals where I wasn't like, man, I can't move you, but it was like, I just can't get to you.
Yeah.
Can't get my hands inside. They were just so tall and they were playing off of you. They were fine with that. So it's just everybody plays you different.
Yeah.
North Carolina plays you off with their height. You got the Georgia Southern, who's got just the big stumps in the middle. Then you got, Florida State, who they're kind of like just the guys who are just freakishly athletic, combination of speed. More speed than strength, but they still got the strength.
Yeah.
So, and then, look at Chattanooga had the guy who was at Georgia for a while, and he was like a 3-star coming out, and he played at Georgia his freshman year and then ended up transferring to Chattanooga. So you talk about a guy like that who I could just keep going. I mean, and then you look at Miles Pierce's brother, who's now with the Ravens.
Michael Pierce.
Those guys had a great D-line too, but we had success against them. So there's other teams we didn't. So there's a lot of guys, man. And that's what's so cool about playing at the Citadel and the SoCon is you're going to play against a lot of guys who are going to get the opportunity to play at the next level. So, I can be watching a game. I think if you watch the Vikings now, Georgia Southern's little running back is now one of their star running backs for a while. You look at the safety from Sanford, who I got the opportunity to block once, and he's now a starting safety in the NFL.
Michael Pierce is doing great with the Ravens.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, there's just a lot of guys, and that's pretty cool. That's what's so cool about the experience as a player is, now as I watch football, to be able to
I was on the field with that guy.
Right, exactly.
I blocked that guy. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's really cool. But, hey, we're going to come back. In the next segment, we're going to talk about a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We're going to talk about a soccer player who we're going to send her our prayers her way. We're going to talk about food, some questions. We're going to talk about Charleston Southern and food. So we have a lot of just random things that kind of just are going around, and we're going to talk about those things. And we'll be right back. Thanks for joining us, guys. All right, welcome back to the SoCon. My name is Kyle Weaver. I'm here with Post and Courier's Jeff Hartsell. One thing I want to say is, Jeff, how can we follow you on social media, as well as you are now putting this video out on Post and Courier? Is that correct?
Well, we put the audio on the website last week just as kind of a test run to see how it did, and I haven't seen any numbers yet. But I think the Post-Courier is definitely looking into expanding not just Citadel coverage, but all our college sports coverage with podcasts and newsletters, and trying to come up with different ways to get to people. On Twitter, I'm at Jeff_ from the PC, and I have a Facebook page devoted to Citadel Sports that you can find as well.
And what's so cool about those is as I'm able to go on and type in Citadel Sports, Jeff Hartsell, Post and Courier, and all your Citadel articles come up. I can go to one page and I can get all your articles, or I could go onto your Twitter, and if I'm not at an away game, you give a pretty good play-by-play, kind of situation-by-situation. So if you're not able to make the games like I'm not able to make most of the away games, that's a great way to follow those guys. And, obviously he's going to post the articles there, so you can pick one or the other. And he also just kind of gives cool facts just about practice or this or that or in week, so a lot of cool stuff there. So just real quick, we're going to answer a Facebook Live comment from my number one fan, my mom. So I was waiting for this to happen. But she says, when Citadel played Chattanooga last year, were both teams undefeated. As a player, Kyle, do you have a favorite memory from that game? She's always asking questions like these. And they're the
well, I know the Citadel was undefeated. I'm not
Chattanooga
sure.
was not, because Chattanooga lost to Mercer a few weeks before. And why that was a big deal is because we went into that game knowing we were SoCon champs. But it was like, are we going to share this thing again? And then if we lose, we don't get the playoff bid because we lost to Chattanooga in the head-to-head, or do we win out? So no. Both teams were not undefeated. Mercer had beat Chattanooga. Favorite memory from that game, and this is what I always tell my mom, I'm going to tell her right again, I am awful with memories as far as, like, certain things. All I remember was it was an awesome game. And
I think his score was 20-14, as I recall.
Yeah.
And the thing I remember most, and I don't want to steal your mom's question, is the picture at the end of the game with Coach Thompson on top of Ryan Bednar, and I think they're looking at the clock, or the clock is winding down, and just the look of joy on their faces. That was a big win.
I think the biggest and the best memory would be, hey, we're having a great season. I think it was like, we were having a great season, and we knew that Chattanooga had given us problems in the past, and they looked pretty good, and it was all these things, and it was one of those deals where we finally beat them at home, and it wasn't like Sanford, I don't believe, where we had to come back to beat Sanford. We beat Chattanooga, and we beat them. We controlled that game, and that was just such an enjoyable to be able to beat a team like Chattanooga and have control of that game the whole time. So that was pretty cool. Another thing we want to talk about, let's talk about the CSU. So Jeff, go ahead and give us an overview of that.
It's sort of in the news this week. Charleston Southern players voted to take the school logo off their helmets last week in their game against Presbyterian, I believe it was, as sort of a protest. And as it turns out, what they're protesting is the food situation that they find themselves in at school. The cafeteria apparently has been closing before most of the guys can get there after practice, or if it's still open, the food's all gone. So a lot of the players find themselves going hungry. And as one of the players who was quoted in the story pointed out, a lot of guys can't really afford to go out to dinner every night. They don't have that kind of spending money, so they depend on the campus food and the cafeteria food. So that was the main issue behind the CSU protest.
And the second issue was the treatment of players, right? I saw something in there. They were saying that there was some, just a little bit of mistreatment or something like that. And they said it wasn't a protest; it was more of just to raise awareness.
Yeah, they're talking about treating the players. I think they're talking about things like food, not abusing them on a practice field or anything like that.
But maybe not appreciating them,
and not giving them what they need to be healthy, athletes. Food and nutrition has become bigger and bigger across the college sports as the big schools have more and more money to spend. A lot of them is spending on nutrition and dietitians
Yeah.
and training table and having food available 24/7 for the players. And I know at the Citadel, you have the dining hall.
Right, which we had this two things. We had the same, very similar situation. If we didn't have Coach D, Coach D was one of those guys where everybody on camp respects him. So when he goes and says, "Hey, look, we need the dining hall to be open for 30 more minutes," they find a way to do it.
Right.
And if it wasn't for him, we didn't have a guy like him, then we would be running into the same. We pushed those boundaries for a little bit. You know, you have some guys who are slow after practice. They're tired. They're beat up. They're just
they might have a meeting to go to.
They have to get treatment for 30 minutes, something like this. So they get to the dining hall late, and we did have some issues with that. But Coach D went to battle for us. The second thing is this is going to be a great segue to what we're going to talk about later. Is we have an organization called the Citadel Football Association who basically they raise money through donations, and they supply like all our summer meals for us. So we get breakfast and lunch during summer. They also do like protein bars in the locker room, stuff like that, milks, all that stuff that say, hey, if an organization like this wasn't around then and supported, then the athletic program wouldn't be able to afford it.
Right.
And I think last year, we're going to get the numbers later, I think they dumped in $170,000 into Citadel football.
Yeah.
And so this project or this or, meals on campus, this and that. So it's pretty cool. But, for CSU, I mean, that's tough.
Yeah.
And
it seems like, as you point out, at smaller schools, that can be an issue.
Right.
Food for not just football players, but for all the athletes can be an issue. There's not money falling off the trees at the Citadel and at Charleston Southern.
I talked to some of my other buddies who play at Carolina or Clemson or wherever they go, and it seems to me from just brief conversations that those guys kind of have their own dining hall that's like kind of catered to them.
Oh yeah,
and it's on their hours. So the Citadel and CSU, both of those, hey, you're going to eat at the dining hall, and they're good situations, whatever, but. Look, those ladies want to leave too. Those ladies have to work late. They work long hours, so they don't want to stay there and, stay late. And, for 30 minutes for 10 extra guys when half the team's already through, because you have half the team who's really quick because they got to go study for a test, or they got to go do this or do this or be at this meeting. And then you have half the other team who, hey, they just have a tough day. They don't have any homework, so they're going to stay in the locker room. They're going to hang out. Fellowship, have a good time. Like that's what college football is about, and have a good time. And then they're going to get there when they get there, and they should still be there for them. So it's a tough situation that hopefully.
I think it's going to get resolved pretty quickly. And CSU is already they're building a new facility up there that's going to include some nutrition elements, maybe a snack bar or someplace the guys can go after hours. And one thing Coach Thompson sort of said, it's incumbent upon the coaches to get them off the field in time to get over there. Not speaking of CSU in particular, but in all situations, to get them over there so they can get something to eat.
Yeah, but, at the same time, like the football coaches, that's not how they're going to, because they're going to say, look, I only get these guys for this long every day, and I'm going to use all my time to get that. So it's tough. It's a tough situation to be in. So, it's tough.
And it's something that Clemson and USC don't even
have to think about. Right.
That's right.
So the last thing we're going to talk about is in this segment is Caroline from the soccer team. Jeff, go ahead and tell us a little bit about that. And
Caroline Cashian, who's a senior, I think she was a graduate student, actually, soccer player at the Citadel. And folks might remember her. She was a field goal kicker at West Ashley High School and kicked the field goal to beat Somerville and Coach John McKissick one year.
Wow.
Not sure if it was in overtime or at the end of the game, but she made the game-winning field goal. So a lot of people remember Caroline about that, for that. But anyway, she was involved in a collision in a recent game and suffered a serious injury that her father posted about on Facebook that had her unable to move her legs. And apparently the feeling is slowly returning, but she's been moved from the hospital to a rehab center. So, all Citadel fans and just people everywhere, it's a terrible situation for Caroline and her family, and we wish her a full and speedy recovery. She's really sort of she had a torn ACL earlier in her career, So she really devoted her life and given everything to soccer, and let's hope that she's able to come back from this full recovery.
Definitely. That's the tough things about sport is injuries, and this is a very serious one from what I have been informed. So we'll definitely be praying for her, and everybody who's watching, just send out your thoughts to her. So, tough situation right there. Well, we're going to end this segment. When we come back, we're going to talk with Megan Gunter from the Citadel Football Association. Let her tell us a little bit about the association as well as what we can do. So we'll be right back in a second. Thanks for joining. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Citadel GrayLine. We're here with our special guest, Megan Gunter, who is in charge of the CFA, and which is a great organization that does a lot for Citadel football. So, Megan, why don't you just go ahead and give us a little overview of what the CFA does, what their goal is, and we'll start with that.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So first off, the Citadel Football Association is really an organization where we try to raise funds to help support the program as much as possible.
Right.
It's a great way to continue to build on the program. It's obviously been around the Citadel for a long time. It's
Right.
our 30th year.
Wow.
And so we just want to continue to support Citadel football in the
Okay.
best way possible. And we're really excited about getting as many alumni and supporters involved as we can.
Right. So I know during my time, some things that you guys kind of pushed the way with is you guys did our smart boards, which we did our meetings on, which is a huge difference and a big tool. You guys did protein bars for us, post-workout, stuff like that. You guys did our summer meals, a lot of those things, which we talked about earlier with CSU is a big deal. So how do you guys get your support? How do you guys get the money? How do you guys get the alumni involved?
Yeah, no. So we do a big membership drive, obviously, right before football season starts, because a lot of people don't know that actually during the football games, we run a terrace at the top of Johnson Haygood. So
awesome.
Your membership gets you access to come up onto the terrace, get to watch the game.
Okay.
And we've actually been selling some adult beverages for many years in the terrace outside of the beer garden. So that's definitely one of the draws that we have to us. Right. We also do a big fundraising effort for our steak nights, which are Monday nights during football
season. Something I forgot, yeah.
So we have a lot of alumni that will donate to that. And it's a kind of way, especially after a big win, you get a ice cream bar and, steak or fried chicken, something to change up from regular cafeteria food. Yeah, let's talk about the steak night. So as a player, that's something you look forward to every week. So I think now it's on Mondays, if it's the same as it was last year. So it's one of those deals. Mondays is our off day. Mondays for me was get as much homework as I could done. If I had a paper, I'm knocking out most of it because I don't want to do that after football. I don't think anybody wants to go through a practice and then go write a paper. So try to do as much on a Monday. And I kind of ended my day with going to state night. It was cool, like the class of 92 would come and talk about the SoCon.
And I know my grade is sponsoring one this year, as well as, just have random alumni who come every year, and you kind of get to know them and see their support and see that there are people who really do care. And as far as from a player's perspective, it's one of those deals where you get to eat really good food as a lot. And at the Citadel, we went back to that as the cafeteria situation is what it is, and it's not the best. So to be able to have ice cream and steak and all these sides is really nice, and a salad bar and all this, and it helps you gain weight. Keep the weight on. So I know, like, for me, Tuesday through Thursday, I would lose a good bit of weight just from practice and hydration, and then I gain it back before game day, lose it, and then gain it right back for Sunday and Monday. So, it's one of those things. It's a cool experience. So,
Megan, do you know how much a steak night costs?
I don't have the exact cost, just because we rotate between about 3 different menus, between fried chicken, steak, shrimp, I think sometimes pork chops.
Yep.
And then it fluctuates with the ice cream bar and a win. And so I think somewhere in the range of, I actually couldn't even guess.
Okay.
And part of that is there's a new cafeteria company that
Okay.
just ventured out with, so we're still trying to figure that out.
Cool.
Okay. And how many members in the CFA?
Right now we're at 520.
Wow. That's a great number.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's huge. Last year we were just under 5, so this year we're over 520, and we still have, the rest of the season to go and continue to build on it.
So we talked about your football game day, what you guys are able to do. So what are some events out of season that you guys do?
So I don't think a lot of people know this. We actually host the football awards banquet. That is actually put on by the CFA.
Awesome.
We do a signing night party at Johnson Haygood. So we allow all of our members to come and kind of hear the coaches recap what our signing class looks like, which is the first Wednesday in February.
Right, which is pretty exclusive. I mean, it's not a big room there, so it's a pretty special thing that you can kind of go to that.
You get to see all the new guys on tape, their highlight films,
right?
Hang out with Jeff. The inside scoop on how they recruited them, and stuff
pick
like
the
that.
coaches' brains, kind of get that inside track as to what to look forward to for the fall.
Awesome.
Yeah. So some other things we've done recently were the new lockers at Signius Hall.
Awesome.
Which we're still looking for sponsorships for that. So if anybody wants to put their name up on a locker.
And that's a situation, Signius Hall, from my sophomore year to my 5th year, is a whole new place. And that's huge, because recruiting wise, you walk in, like, I think when I was getting recruited, they really probably didn't want to show you the locker rooms, because if you go to App State or there's other ones that were in the SoCon at the time, you'd be like, what? Like, I'm not going there. But now it's a place where they're proud about it. So, and it's an awesome place, especially at the Citadel. We spend so much time in the locker room because of, the Citadel aspect of it, that we're always together. We're always in meetings. We go there after class so that we can be there for meetings and stuff. So
the weight rooms there too.
Yeah. So we're there all the time, and it was awesome to have a facility like that. And then now upstairs is, awesome.
They have I think they call it a learning center, where the computers, and that used to just be a blank hallway up there. So a lot of good work has been done at Signius.
Yeah, it's it really does impact the recruiting effort. I think that the Citadel is able to procure, because we're competing against Wofford, who just has huge recruiting budgets, and their facilities are so nice. It's just a way that we can at least try to help differentiate ourselves.
Right. So as anybody, as a Citadel fan, how can they get involved? Who do they need to reach out to? What are the packages that they could do, or just kind of walk me through that?
So the first thing would be join the CFA.
Okay.
You can join online. It's cfabulldogs.org. We are a 501c3, so it all is a tax donation. You will get a letter. You join, it's $135 for your annual membership. That gives you access to the terrace for all the home games, gets you an invite to the signing night. Then from there, you can always sponsor a steak night. If you'd like to sponsor a steak night, you can get a group together of parents if you're a player parent, or if you're an alumni that has a class that'd like to get together
Right.
like your class.
Right.
And those are kind of, first things first. And then from there, if you want, you can buy a locker, put your name up, give it to a graduate, give it to someone, that you knew or in honor of, kind of have a permanent piece in Signius Hall.
Right. So how much would something like a locker cost? Or
lockers are $1,000.
Okay.
And steak night is $750.
$750. Okay. Awesome. And so that steak night money will go to just raising money so that you guys can buy whatever the coaches kind of come to you and say, hey, this is what we need to continue to be an elite program.
Right.
And you guys are just kind of there. So basically the athletic program kind of has a budget, if I'm correct, on what they can kind of throw to the football program. And then you guys kind of fill the gaps of like what they gave you, that budget, and what the program needs. Is that correct? So you guys kind of fill that gap. And how much did you guys give last year?
If
you guys are allowed to say.
I don't know about last year,
Okay.
but I know currently for this year we're right at $40,000
Already.
Already just for this year, and we still have a long ways to go. We still are actively trying to figure out what the next step is as how we can support Citadel football.
Awesome.
It's safe to say that Citadel football would not be what it is without the CFA. You guys wouldn't eat the way you do,
right.
Travel the way you do, have the nice locker room as we mentioned, without a group like that. And I think that really does make a huge difference,
right.
as you said, in recruiting and just in the everyday atmosphere and health of the players.
Awesome.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Well, anything else you want to let the people know, the viewers know? Anything else we can talk about? Any cool projects, anything?
Well, first they can find us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Citadel Football Association. We're on Twitter, CFA Bulldogs. I think the lockers are big right now. We are trying to get some display cases for all of our new hard-fought trophies. So we are definitely looking forward to getting those displayed well.
Awesome.
We're just looking to finish out the season and have some big turnout on the terrace. And,
awesome.
Really support you guys on steak nights. And
right. So it's pretty cool. Like if you sponsor a state night, that you're allowed to come join the team for the meal, which you kind of get to interact with those guys. Everybody will come shake your hand. You can pull a player aside that you want to talk to, and say, hey, great game. And
you can watch John Wesley Whiteside eat. He's the big 300-pound freshman lineman.
Hey,
and all this, wouldn't have been possible without, expert leadership from Charlie Baker having established this program 30 years ago to the past 8 years. It's been ran by John Carlisle, both Citadel alumni, both really great guys who have a great vision for supporting Citadel football.
I mean, those guys are some of the most passionate, most involved. They're always at the games. I mean, that's another cool thing. You get to hear Charlie Baker speak, which if you've never done that right there is worth the donation itself. So, well, thanks for joining us today. Hopefully, if you guys want to get involved, it's a cool organization. You guys get game day privileges. So join up and help Citadel football and go from there.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining us this week of the Citadel GrayLine. We'll be back next week after hopefully another Dogs win. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys then. Thank you.